In April 1975, John Womack was driving down a dirt road at the foot of Ryan Mountain in the Tennessee Valley of northern Alabama. He was driving slowly when he saw a ball of fire about 3 feet in diameter fall from the sky and through some tree branches onto the road a few feet from his car. This object rolled down the gravel road, and John followed the object about 25 feet away. The object stayed in the middle of the road, following the road without stopping or deterring from the path as if it had a mind of its own. John watched as the object went down the hill and turned sharply to the right, even crossing a narrow bridge. John continued to watch as the object suddenly stopped about 10 meters from the bridge and then turned 90 degrees to the left and continued moving, this time down into an open meadow that ran along a nearby stream that crossed by the bridge. He stopped his car and got out, walking towards the meadow. The object suddenly made a noise like a puff and then shot straight up, arching to the left over the surrounding forest and disappeared. John looked at the sky in complete amazement when he suddenly heard a low hum in the direction in which the object disappeared, and suddenly a huge silver disc with shallow upper and lower domes appeared. The object was about 150 feet in diameter and was surrounded by a yellow-blue glow that extended several feet away from the ship and flew at a height of about 300 to 400 feet. The strange ship stopped about 100 feet from John and made a low humming noise that could be compared to a turbine or a fan running on high. However, the object managed to be quiet at first as it came incredibly close to John before he noticed it come into the area. The ship hovered in the air for what John estimated to be about 2 minutes when suddenly the ship began releasing a bright pillar of light. When John saw this light, chills ran up and down his spine, and he slowly began to walk back to the driver's side of the car. However, he didn't get very far until he saw the ray of light slowly reach the ground and spread over the ground like a mist. The UFO emanated a high-pitched whistle, and John watched as the light spread so far that it almost touched the road. Shortly after the buzzing, it became silent. John reasoned that this light might not be light as we know it, or that what he saw wasn't even light, because this luminous substance seemed to be denser and foggier than light. It was at this point that the UFO began to descend. John began to run away from the descending object, moving much faster than his previous escape attempt. But as he nearly reached his car, he turned and was suddenly struck in the face by a beam of bright red light, which seemed to knock John unconscious, and he found him in a large room on the craft of about 50 by 50 feet and about 12 feet tall. He was sitting in a padded chair with what appeared to be a golden metal helmet on his head that was tied to a cord attached to a strange machine. There were several other complex-looking devices in this room, and they seemed brightly lit but without any visible lamps or other light sources, as if the walls themselves were emanating light. Continuing to look around, he noticed that he was not alone. He was surrounded by 3 beings. However, he was surprisingly calm and at first thought that it was all a dream, but soon realized it wasn't. The first beings he saw, which he called leaders, were mostly human, except for the head and facial features. These creatures had egg-shaped heads and a noseless face and a poise-like mouth. These creatures also had a coarse and twisted short hair that grew on both their upper lip and head. They also wore a thin, green, scratchy suit. They communicated in a language that John compared to the croaking of a tree frog. Then there were 3 creatures that John called giants. 2 of these giant creatures stood next to him, one on each side and one in a different part of the room. These giant creatures were at least 8 feet tall, with a hairy chest, back, and arms, and a brutal appearance that reminded John of prehistoric men. They wore no clothes but pants. Seeing these creatures, John knew that any confrontation on his part would be futile and simply continued to look around the room. One of the strangest things about this situation was that there were about 6 to 8 5-foot creatures scattered around the room. These creatures were extremely strange because they had legs like a seal or a sea lion, 6 thin arms with crab-like claws, 2 antennae, and a beard. The bodies of these creatures were covered with greenish, warty lumps, except for their heads, which were large and bore wide grins. John felt that this smiling expression made them look comical and harmless. As these creatures moved, John noticed that their movement seemed clumsy and heavy. Looking around at the strange sight, he realized that although the room was covered in strange devices and machines, it had no doors or windows, just a large television-type screen covering the wall to John's right. This screen showed continuous images of the area where the ship had landed. Each time an image of John's car appeared on the screen, a buzzer would start playing and the image would stop. John realized that the screen was incredibly effective at taking images, as the pictures of his car would be incredibly bright and vivid as if they were taken in daylight, even though it was night. John thought, looking at the screen, that he would never be able to go home. It was then that one of the leaders walked up to John and started talking to a small square box that was also connected to the computer to which his helmet was connected. The creature held this box, and after it was finished talking, the computer-like machine started talking to John. The machine said in a mechanical, artificial voice, "We are peaceful, we will not harm you, we are sentient beings like you. You are not a prisoner, you are a guest." The creature then reached out and offered John to shake its hand. Believing that nothing would happen to him, John shook the creature's hand. As he did this, another leader-type entity appeared with 2 small white pills and placed one on John's hand, and the entity signaled for John to swallow the pill. John complied after placing the pill in his mouth. It immediately dissolved, and he swallowed the rest. As he did this, John felt completely happy and relaxed and had a sudden desire to learn more about these creatures. John suddenly had the overwhelming feeling that everything seemed fine, including the helmet on his head. His brain was full of happy thoughts, and he realized that he had never been so happy in his entire life. Man, I want this pill. Then the leader spoke once more to the box, that a communication device between the two. He explained, "This is a machine built by one of the most advanced races of people in this galaxy. It can translate my language into your language, and it can also repeat your thought waves and language into my language. This machine is 1,000 years ahead of your knowledge. Attempting to understand how it works is a waste of time. Welcome to our spaceship. You are free to leave if you want. Do you want to know more about us? Do you have any questions? The leader brought the box closer to John's face. As he did so, John took a good look at the box and said it looked like a small transistor radio and was also about the same size. John or the leader would speak into it, and when he finished speaking, the leader pressed a switch and turned a dial on the box. Then the computer played the listener's language, translating what the speaker said. John spoke, "Yes, I am glad for the opportunity to learn about your people." He was currently still concentrating on why he was so full of joy and happiness, but soon his attention was drawn to a strange sight on the other side of the room. There John saw a strange object, which he soon realized was a type of plant. It was kept in a pot, and it almost reached the ceiling and looked to be half animal. The plant bore 8-foot-long black spotted tentacles. The trunk of the plant was about 3 feet thick, covered in hanging yellow flower balls and an orange crown that resembled a giant honeycomb. The plant's arms stretched out and seemed to follow the bearded crabmen as they wandered near the plant. One of the creatures seemed to be playing some kind of game with the plant as it came very close, only to move away before the plant could get hold of it. Watching the show, John thought, "God, I wish I had a camera." His mind went back to his peace and happiness and asked the leader why he felt this way and how he got aboard the ship. The creature replied, "Look at the screen. You will see how you got on board. We lowered the ramp and you walked on board." The screen then showed an image of him walking up the ramp and walking into the ship. Your brain was temporarily inactive because of the red beam you saw. A quick signal made you follow it inside the ship. We gave you an injection that prevented you from getting too scared and excited. An Earth being with a bad heart can pass away from shock without the injection in your current situation. We really don't want to hurt anyone. The leader then began to talk about his sudden joy, explaining that it was the result of a scientific exorcism. The joy and inner peace you feel now is the purest and most perfect state of life. For the first time, you will experience a life free of demons. I cannot express how much I want a life free of demons. I have been stressing myself out a lot lately about several things. The leader continued, "Demons are everywhere in the universe. We do not fully understand the demons that invade our mind and make us mean, greedy, and selfish, and miserable. The pill I gave you is an anti-demon pill, and it removed all the demons and their influences from your mind, leaving nothing but pure joy in your soul. The anti-demon pill is our greatest discovery. It removes all anger, jealousy, greed, misery, and wars. It makes a person completely happy just to be alive. A demon-free person does not need material possessions to give them a false sense of security. When the mind is free from demons, only love and joy remain in it. These demons cause all wars. They make us want to confiscate other people's property. They make us take others' lives, maim, rob, and enslave our brothers. Demons have destroyed the happiness of countless billions of souls in our galaxy, maybe the entire universe. There are many ways to destroy our greatest enemy, demons. Our biggest problem has always been demons. Demons are not real, but states of mind as most people think. They are not visible to the eye, but exist on a higher plane of life. Demons can enter and leave at will. We photographed them with a special camera and studied their habits, and were able to develop a chemical that demons cannot tolerate. The pill is not mind-altering. It is not that simple. Sorry for the tricks we used to get you on our ship. Still taking everything in, John asked, "It's okay, I'm glad you did. That ball of fire was a trick?" The entity said yes, and John replied, "How did you do that?" The entity just shook its head, and John continued, "That was a fascinating story about demons, and now I feel free from them. Can you tell me more about your world?" The leader continued his question. "I would be delighted to. Look at the screen again, and I will also show you scenes from my world. Our planet is 40 light years away from your Earth. It's like your planet but bigger. Plant life is different, and as you can see, we are different from you in many ways. And in many ways you cannot see. Everyone takes anti-demon pills, and we live in a constant state of joy. Your people have countless problems and short lives. We have none of your common problems. Our people have been alive for hundreds of years. Those aboard this ship have not been home for 50 years, and if we started heading back now, it would take another 40 years to reach our world. Our journey is more than a lifetime on Earth. A chemical mixed with our food prevents the aging of our body cells. There is no disease on our planet. I hope that within our lifetimes, Earth will be like this. Someone smart, please work on figuring out how to do that. You don't know how much I want to be happy and immortal." John then asked the creature, "What do you eat, and how do you provide enough food for such long space trips?" He replied, "Our main source of food consists of 8 different types of plants, which are then mixed with other chemicals and nutrients. This mixture is processed into small granules. 6 pellets a day is a normal diet. We have no need for fine foods and fancy dishes. Never mind, I don't want to live like them. Food is my favorite thing. I love going out to new places and trying different foods. It is my favorite thing to do. I would not give up food for immortality, but I really wish I could eat what I want without negative health consequences or gaining weight. Someone smart, please work on inventing that. You would become a trillionaire within a year." Or how about the aliens to share their anti-demon pills and chemicals that prevent aging with us? He continued, "These things are frivolous to us. Of course, our planets and other planets have an endless variety of foods for those who want variety. Thank God. But we usually stick to our basics. We don't eat any meat. Our staple foods can be stored indefinitely." John then asked, "I wonder how many planets are out there in space and are habitable. Do you know?" He answered, "We know that there are hundreds of planets in our galaxy with intelligent beings. Because of the great size of the galaxy known as the Milky Way, we have explored only a small part of it, and of course we cannot visit other galaxies, but we believe there are at least thousands of inhabited places in the entire universe. There are many different intelligent beings in our galaxy. On our current journey into space, we saved 3 giants and smaller creatures on board from certain extinction. Look at the screen again and you will see what happened." Then the screen lit up and began to show what the leader described. The planet of the little people was destroyed by storms and floods when a huge comet passed nearby. Those on board are the only survivors. The screen showed that these lucky survivors had hid in an observation station on the highest peak of the planet. The creature continued, "The giants are what is left of an endangered race. These people are the strongest and most durable creatures we know. They can lift 3,000 pounds. However, the conditions on their planet became so harsh that they could not survive." No, the size of their sun on the screen, their sun expanded and the heat became unbearable. Most of the vegetation was burned. Their sun was reaching the end of its life, one of the harshest realities in the universe. Planets are ended somewhere all the time. John, hearing this approaching universal doom, asked, "Can you see the future of people on Earth?" He replied, "People on Earth are very unique in their ways. Your people are complicated but interesting to study. But unfortunately, you are the most belligerent and selfish people ever. Some of you are dangerous and treacherous. People on other planets who have learned space travel are watching you and are deeply concerned about your sick nature. Some of the main leaders in your world only respect power and authority. They are unhappy souls who cannot rest unless they obtain more power. They will stop at nothing in their vain attempts to impose their evil ways on others. Your country is the last hope for freedom on Earth, but for many years your leaders have sold you to the devil, to those who want to enslave you. If you continue to let your weak leaders sell you out, freedom will not last on Earth. Your people will also become too selfish and irresponsible for effective self-governance. This attitude must change, or you will lose the freedom you enjoy now." But it's not the people, it's the demons inside you. Your only hope for true peace and joy is to find your own anti-demon pill. Only then will people on Earth respect each other and lay down their destructive weapons. And only then will the people of your world come to a state of mind where they can trust and care for each other. Then John began to ask, "How do you know so much about what is happening on Earth?" To which the entity replied, "My people have been studying your Earth for several thousand years. We have been tracking your progress since long before the time of Moses. Our tracking and observation methods are very advanced." Realizing the infinite wisdom of these creatures, John decided to ask a question about one of the most enduring mysteries. "Do you know the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle?" That makes the story so much less believable for me, if it weren't already. The entity replied, "The mystery is," and then suddenly stopped and said, "Sorry, we're not allowed to release direct scientific information. Each world must develop and grow in knowledge in its natural way. This is a universal law. We know the answers to your problems on Earth, but we cannot help you directly because the only way to get you to follow our advice is to use force. We have learned this from past experiences. So our policy is to let things be. Too much information too soon will destroy you. Even now, your scientists have learned to use nuclear energy, but the people of your world have not learned to live in peace. This information is very dangerous and is a good example of too much information too soon. And you don't have a clean and safe way to operate your machines and equipment. The sun is the answer to your energy problems. It is the only definitive answer. Our sun provides all our energy needs. Even this interstellar spacecraft runs on solar energy. John continued after hearing the creature describe its fuel needs and asked, "Is your time here limited? Do you have time for any more questions?" The creature replied, "You will know when it's time for us to leave. Ask what you want to know. If I can answer your questions, I will." John, seeing a possible answer to the mystery, decided to ask the entity what he thought of psychics. The entity replied, "Many of our people are psychic. Some are advanced in the use of spiritual energy. Many are very accurate in their predictions and can move hundreds of pounds with mind power alone. Some of our people can predict threats years in advance. They are very valuable to us, but we don't know all the answers compared to what is unknown. We are still infants in knowledge. There are mysteries in the universe to last forever. We have no idea how the universe came to be or what it is made of. This is the greatest question of all. That basic material, which is the foundation of the universe, seems to be beyond the knowledge of physical beings like you and me." John wanted to discuss the psychics further and said, "You mentioned that psychics are valuable to your world. Can you give me an example why?" He replied, "The most dramatic events at about the same time in history that Columbus discovered your part of the world, one of our psychics predicted that in 40 years our planet would be hit and thrown out of orbit by a small planet the size of your moon. We found this small planet wandering uncontrollably through space. The computers confirmed that a collision was indeed inevitable. We landed on the planet that was solid rock and seeded it with explosives that your world has never seen. They completely vaporized the planet." He showed John the scenes of these events as he described them, and then said that he knew of many disasters caused by the collision of two celestial bodies. The leader then told him that a drifting cloud of toxic gases eliminated a race and another planet was frozen solid. The creature described how the universe naturally has stars that burn and explode, and specifically no race controlled its own destiny. John knew his time to speak with these creatures was coming to an end. He was surprised he never asked the name of any of the entities, especially the name of the leader he had been talking to the whole time. It was because of this closing time span that John began to ask more direct and specific questions. How can you be sure that other distant galaxies have not solved the mysteries of the universe? The being answered, the best answer to that question is, it is obvious to us that if others were so advanced, they must have interacted with us in some way already. That has not happened. The space travel in our galaxy is only done by inhabitants of this galaxy. We know this is true. We haven't detected even a faint signal from another galaxy. Of course, you understand the vastness of the universe. A trip to the nearest galaxy outside of ours would take 1,000,000 years, traveling at the speed of light. It's almost unthinkable. Our spacecraft reaches a speed of 186,000 miles per second. The speed of light. But even at that high speed, it's too slow for practical intergalactic space travel. There are over 100 billion stars in our own galaxy. Traveling at the speed of light, it will take 100,000 years to travel from one side of the Milky Way to the other. There are possibly billions of galaxies in the universe. Some are undoubtedly billions of light years away. So you can see the complications and slow speed of space travel. The creature pointed to the screen again and showed John the vastness and emptiness of space. John decided to get religious and asked the creature if he believed in God or some other supreme being. The being said, "Yes, and we believe our psychics are in direct contact with the Creator. We believe that a superior spirit or higher intelligence created the universe and the laws of nature. In our view, creation cannot be intelligently explained in any other way. But like I said, we have no idea how the universe was created or why. Exploring and studying the universe is our whole life, and we never get tired of it. Thousands of spacecraft explore our galaxy. We have several types of spaceships. The seemingly bored creature then grabbed John's hand and said, "Come on, let me show you around. We have a lot of things that might interest you." John looked across the room, stared at the strange plant in wonder, and said to the creature, "I'd like to take a closer look at the plant over there." Leader-type creatures started talking to each other in their frog-esque language. The other leader type, who was in the room but not talking to John, began to bring out a device about the size of a large television and proceeded to attach John's golden helmet to the device. And as John and the being moved to the opposite side of the room, the being pushed the device behind him. Arriving at the plant, the creature began to connect this machine to a panel a few meters away from the alien plant. As he did, the leader began to speak again, saying, "We have 2 of these plants on board. They provide us with all the oxygen we need, but we have oxygen in emergency storage. The plants thrive on solar energy, fed to them by our power plant and chemicals that are in the tank it is in. Our body needs very little oxygen and moisture. Fortunately, there is plenty of moisture throughout the galaxy. Moisture in the form of ice, snow, water, and gases is abundant on most planets. Because we get by with so little, we can store enough moisture on board to last several years if needed." John then told the creatures that the plant was beautiful but seemed dangerous. At this, the creature said, "The plant is playful and enjoys our company. It is not dangerous. It is strong enough to hold one of the bearded people, but it will never hurt one of them." John was then given a tour of the ship and discovered that it had 4 floors and an elevator connecting the floors. The ship had 2 main floors, with 1 large and several smaller compartments on each floor. There were 2 utility floors, one of which was an engine room and the other a storage room. The engine room was upstairs. The creature explained to John that the engine room, also called the power plant, collected energy from stars and converted it into a form of energy that could be used to power their ships, also adding that solar energy can be stored for a long time. During his tour, John noticed that there were other creatures on board that resembled the leader. There were about 25 of them, but none seemed to notice or interact with him, as if John was just one of a long line of species that had boarded the ship. John noticed during his tour that the humming sound he heard coming from the ship was produced by the engine and was almost inaudible inside the ship. The leader showed John several machines, 2 of which John found particularly exciting. Others were so scientific in their functions that he had no idea what the leader was talking about, explaining what they did. One particular machine was a device so powerful that it could penetrate an object to its atoms, which was shown on the screen. In one of the craft's smaller rooms, the creature asked John if he would stand behind the machine connected to a screen on the wall, where John could see a live image of every organ, bone, artery, and muscle in his body. The leader explained that this device can diagnose cancer and cardiovascular diseases. They returned to the first floor, where John was taken to a very advanced and technical department. At this point, the being asked John, "Would you like to take a journey to the stars?" John had faith in the entity after hearing that vague statement and said he was ready to go. The abduction of Betty, Andreas, and Luca is considered one of the most documented cases in the history of UFOlogy. A woman from Massachusetts experienced several abductions, and her case was thoroughly investigated by UFO researchers. It became popular after the publication of the best-selling novel the Anderson affair in the late 1970s. She participated in numerous radio-television interviews discussing her encounter with gray aliens and even drew sketches of the events. According to official reports, Betty was at home with her 7 children and parents on the evening of January 25, 1967, around 6:30 p.m. She was busy in the kitchen when the lights in the house started flickering. Strangely, soon after, a reddish beam of light hit the kitchen window and the electricity went out in the whole house. The children were startled by this and Betty tried to calm them down. Her father looked outside to find the source of the light and saw 5 strange humanoid creatures walking straight towards the house. Before he could fully understand the situation, the creatures entered the house through the door, shocking the whole family. One of the creatures went to Betty's father, and the other 4 came to her, and one of them started talking to her telepathically. It was 5 feet tall, while the others were shorter than that. The description from the witnesses was similar to a modern image of gray aliens. They only had slits on their mouths, 3 fingers on one hand, and wore blue one-piece suits. Betty was scared, but at the same time she felt reassured by the friendly nature of the creatures. They did no harm to any family member and even freed her daughter from a state of unawareness. She was taken outside and lifted into the saucer-shaped small dome ship that stood in the backyard. It took off to rejoin the mothership, where Betty was subjected to medical tests and was under the effect of strange devices. She was later taken to some strange place where she felt a lot of pain, which she said was a spiritual experience. Later that night, Betty returned home at 10:40 p.m. and found her family still frozen and one of the aliens guarding them in her absence. Then the creatures put the family to bed and the aliens left. She also forgot about her abduction until she underwent hypnotherapy in later years. Betty said in some of her interviews that these beings were angelic in nature, but not biblical. She was a religious woman. She only had a little schooling and didn't understand much about UFOs. Only after this strange experience did she realize that everything she experienced that night was similar to a UFO abduction. In 1975, Dr. Alan J. Hynek placed an ad in a newspaper seeking information about abduction experiences, asking for help from ordinary people. Betty responded to his message by sending a letter, but it was rejected because of its unusual details. It was not until 1977 that her case was thoroughly investigated by experts, including a solar physicist, an electronics engineer, an aerospace engineer, a telecommunications expert, and a UFO researcher. One investigator said, "I think the most amazing thing about Betty was her ability to draw the details of the spaceship and the beings she drew under hypnosis were such that it really made me believe there was really something to her story." He also added that the detective who gave Betty a psychological stress evaluation and believed her story. She even spoke an alien language under hypnosis. He investigated her case for 12 months, during which she and her daughter underwent hypnosis sessions, lie detector tests, and a psychiatric interview. Both mother and daughter passed them with genuine reaction. In one hypnotic regression session, she recalled one of the early abductions that happened to her as a child in 1950. When she was transported from her home to a spaceship as usual. But this time the ship flew into the ocean. She was afraid that the ship would crash into the water, but the ship submerged and entered some kind of tunnel. Betty could see everything underwater as it was full of light. She saw people of all eras and races cased in a glass container. It was called the Museum of Time. Betty said that the people in the container were dressed in vintage clothing, and the underwater base had countless cubicles with people in them.